Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third annual Native Plant Symposium. My name is Jessica McCauley with the Prince William Soil and Water Conservation District, and I will be moderating this presentation today. I'm very honored to introduce Nancy Berlin, who will be presenting Establishing and Maintaining Meadows. Nancy enjoys her work currently serving Prince William County, Manassas City, and Manassas Park as a natural resource specialist and coordinator of the Virginia Cooperative Extension Master Gardener Program since 2007. She studied natural resources at Virginia Tech's graduate program. The Prince William Master Gardener Program has over 200 active, highly trained volunteers who serve as environmental educators, teaching our community sustainable landscaping, savvy lawn care, effective and research-based pest management as a last alternative, as well as wildlife and water quality programs. Staff and volunteers in the Master Gardener Program have been involved in the launching of many community gardens and other collaborative projects. I might add that I am a Master Gardener intern, and I highly recommend it to anyone who might be interested. Nancy has her own beautiful meadows she visits every day in the spring and summer. This presentation is a great opportunity to learn from her research and experiences. At the end of the presentation, we will have a 10-minute Q&A in the chat box. You can type your questions there at any time, and I will relay them to Nancy, and she will answer them at the end. And now, here's Nancy Berlin presenting Establishing and Maintaining Meadows.
Hey, this is one of my favorite topics. I'm glad to be talking with you today about it. And Jess gives me hope for she's the same age as my children, and so she gives me hope for the next generation picking up the baton here because I'm getting older. So let's define a meadow first. For a biologist, it's a grassland where plants flower and drop their seeds, and it's not a place where animals graze. But to a farmer, meadows were traditionally grasslands that were either mown to make hay or used as forage for livestock. But for us today, and for most people, we're going to call it a flat or a sloping or a lowland grassland, or simply a flower-rich grassland. And I emphasize the word grassland for a reason, which will become apparent as we talk more. So this is a picture of Chanticleer's garden. Chanticleer is in Wayne, Pennsylvania. It's one of my favorite gardens. Not all of the plants in this, you see some goldenrods represented, but not all the plants in this are native, but you can see how they've done a kind of a design. And a meadow is about 50 to 70% native grasses or sedges. And so there's no woody vegetation in it. So it's predominantly grass, and that will make maintenance certainly much easier. There's no woody vegetation. There's diverse plant groups, varied bloom times, varied plant height, and flower color, and it provides a habitat. So here's some myths that I hear a lot about meadows. It's really easy to just achieve a colorful, flower-filled meadow spring through fall, no problem. Not true. Meadows require little to no maintenance. A lot of our clients want to start a meadow so they never have to mow again. And honestly, mowing less is one of the benefits of a meadow, but it doesn't require no maintenance. And you know those meadow in a can that you can buy? You can't simply scatter the seeds and have a meadow. It does take some management and some planning. And most of those meadow in a can are annuals that you probably don't want a whole meadow of annuals that you'll have to reseed every year. There's some challenges certainly to establishing a meadow. There's a lot of poor instructional material out there. I would encourage you to read a reputable source, a .edu or a .ext after your search terms, or to get an extension publication, or Virginia Native Plant Society or Sangha. There's a lot of local resources. Sometimes there can be a shortage of the natives that you want. That's becoming less and less of a problem as we get more and more native plant vendors. It does take some persistence to have a meadow. It builds your character. And a lot of people, again, have those unrealistic expectations because of the myths. That's Penstemon digitalis, a beard tongue on the left with raindrops coming off, and that's a great meadow plant, really sturdy, even though it looks so gentle. So here's some reasons why you might be in this seminar today. You might want to do less mowing, provide habitat, provide seeds and cover and nesting material for the birds in your neighborhood. You might want to do it as an example of stewardship. I'm stewarding the land that I have and taking care of it. A meadow could also absorb some of your stormwater and reduce erosion. And there's no need to use fertilizers or pesticides. And this is my favorite, endless learning opportunities. Every day I learn something new, and my plants are teaching me what they need. And a meadow with native plants thrives in poor soil. And by poor soil, I mean native soil that we have, clay. So here's a aerial shot of my humble abode, really modest house in a neighborhood without an HOA. And you can see I've made some paths in the meadow. This is taken, it's grown immensely since that time. And I've started to add a few shrubs as I get older. I can't manage all the property. So I tend to put some shrubs and trees in there to make it a little easier on my back. On the left, you'll see that was the first year I did a meadow, and I had a lot of annuals in there, and not all of them are native. And so I've morphed that into a native meadow with a lot more diversity. And some of those plants are still coming up. In the bottom left-hand corner, you see Monarda fistulosa and Heliopsis, that fall sunflower. And those are both really good meadow plants. We'll talk about a little bit more later. Meadows are also used for stormwater management. I had a problem area in my yard. It's not a meadow, but you can see that slope is pretty steep, and plants do a really good job of holding that soil in. At Wolftrap, they put in a stormwater pond, a dry pond, and they seeded it and plugged it with meadow plants. And that makes for a much better looking stormwater pond. Maybe you don't have room for a whole meadow, but you could do a vegetated swale or this mini meadow here in a parking area. So your yard is really important. We think of our yard as being just a small slice of our, of life. But Doug Tallamy says that as gardeners, we use native plants, that we can have just a beautiful landscape, but even more important, we can protect biodiversity. Doug Tallamy has a new program, Homeground National Park. I encourage you to go to this website. And in the past, we've said that, in the past, we've always wanted our gardens to be pretty, but now we need them to support life, to sequester carbon, to feed pollinators, and to manage water. So as part of this program, he's mapping so people can join their yards together and create small national parks with a pathway for pollinators to navigate and other wildlife to navigate. So you probably know this already, but here's a comparison of meadow versus turf. With a meadow, you only need to mow it annually, if that, and there's no irrigation except when I'm establishing new plants. They definitely need more babying. No fertilizers or pesticides, and you need some weed control when you're doing the site plan and with establishment. Once the meadow gets going, you can go into the meadow briefly and do some weeding. For turf, though, it requires that weekly mowing and irrigation. And turf is a incredibly labor-intense crop. It requires fertilizer. If you're going to have thick turf, you need to have that turf fertilized every year in the fall. And so converting that turf to a meadow means less input in herbicides, pesticides, and weed control. So let's talk a little bit about site assessment. You want to have a soil test possibly, or take take a look at what kind of soil you have and how compacted it is. You might want to draw a diagram of the area that you've selected. Do you have wildlife? Do you need deer-resistant plants? Or groundhog dug holes 3 burrows under my front meadow, so it's a really good habitat. Decide what size, and I'd urge you to go small at first. Is it adjacent to a riparian area or a stream or a wooded area? Stay on your property, not on the right of way. What kind of sun exposure have you got? Because that's going to make it possible for you to pick the right plants for the right meadow. Are there plants and trees present? I have a front yard meadow that's full sun, and I have a backyard meadow that's under a walnut tree. And that's pretty challenging, but I found a lot of plants that grow really well under there. Is there a slope, and is it wet or dry? That will affect the management of it and the plants that you select. And are you going to have to deal with tree roots? Okay, so size and function. These are 3 pictures of the life stages of the Asian ladybug, pupa, larva, and mating adults. And I was thrilled to find all of these just right outside my front door. And it's just really fun to learn in my meadow every day. Do you want it for pollinators, a cutting garden, aesthetics? I hope for all of the above, that you would select having a meadow for those reasons. So consider your topography in your yard. This is my backyard. The big tree on the left is the black walnut, and just past that bluebird house is the meadow area. So find out where the last place the snow melts is the coolest and the least sunny place in your yard. So take a look now. In the winter, we're going to get some snow tomorrow. That would be a good time to look. Or watch after spring rains for low spots for placement of plants that like red feet, like this cardinal flower, native perennial. So the next step, again, shady areas are possible, but pick a sunny, visible spot for the most variety. Consider an area that adjoins another habitat. And you're going to remove turf. I'm not going to speak to herbicides because I'm going to give you 3 alternatives to herbicides, but you're going to either smother it or solarize it to get rid of the turf area. And native plants prefer that poor soil. Get a plan to remove the weeds and the grasses and keep the edges neat if that's important to you. And then order plugs and plants and seeds native to your ecoregion. So specific to Northern Virginia, those are the plants that you want to use. Decide if you need deer-resistant plants. A few more steps. Make sure you include that large percentage of native grasses. Plants will need watering weekly, more often for plugs and seeds. You got to monitor this closely when you're establishing your meadow. Fall is usually a more forgiving time in our climate, but who knows what we're up against next fall. Seeding is a little tricky. You need good soil to seed contact and adequate moisture. And most seeds can be just scratched into the soil. You do not want to till and disturb the soil because that's going to bring up all the eons of weed seeds that are under there. So any seeding that you do should disturb the soil as little as possible. Learn what the seedlings look like so you don't weed them up by mistake. And NRCS has that's in my resources at the end. They have an excellent guide to native plant seedlings. But what I like to do is sow a few seeds in pots so that I can look and watch them grow, and then I really recognize them. Don't mulch or fertilize. The only place I mulch is around the edges if I want to keep it neat, and plan for filling in or the next phases. And that's a fleabane daisy rigeron, all closed up and getting ready to pop open. That's a nice native plant that tends to be a bit aggressive, but there are places in my yard that I'm glad I have it. So get to know what rules of your HOA. I don't have an HOA to deal with, but know what's ahead and get to know your neighbors and kind of tell them what you're doing. Consider the Audubon at Home program. Master gardeners in Prince William County will visit your yard for free and talk with you about ways to improve your habitat. We're not there to judge your landscaping or your weeds or anything like that. We're there to help you and encourage you to be certified as an Audubon at Home participant. The Prince William County Watershed Branch is a good thing to contact them if you're with a drawing of what you're planning on doing, so that if any neighbors, not, no, I hope not, but if any neighbors should complain, you have a landscape plan on file with the Prince William County Watershed Branch. And be prepared to provide advantages and a short elevator speech. Every time I'm out in my yard, even in the winter, people stop by. They want to know about what plant that is and what they have a million questions. And so be prepared with that, and maybe be prepared to give them a package of native plant seeds. And that, I love to do that too. Or I've even dug up plants for them. So this is yarrow. This is a really great native plant. That's the straight species. Let's talk about site preparation. Solarizing is an environmentally friendly method. And so what you're basically doing is you're taking clear plastic during warm or to hot weather, and you're going to make sure that you water the area really good first, because that steam is what that develops, and the condensation under the plastic is what really helps do the trick. And you leave the plastic on for about 4 weeks after watering it, and tamp the sides down, with rocks, or bury them under soil. And then you remove the plastic, and then it's fairly ready to plant. If you get the right plastic, if you get thicker plastic, you can reuse that. I have plastic that I've used 3 or 4 years now in different areas of my yard. A similar process would be occultation, just means cut off from view. And this way you're using black plastic instead of, if you can leave this on for about 2 weeks during warm weather. You can even do it now during the winter and leave it until spring. When I pulled mine, I did this too, just to test it out. And when I pulled mine back, I found like 3 ring-necked snakes, 1 DeKay's brown snake, and a whole bunch of garter snakes that had taken refuge under there and eaten all the insects, I think. A third way is to just put a really thick layer of arborist chips on the area that you want to have your meadow established. And I'm talking 5 inches thick. And just you could do that now, let them sit, and then pull them back to do planting. Or, they might have deteriorated by then. They break down pretty quickly, and they add to the soil. University of Washington has done a lot of great research on this. All you have to do is call Novec. I don't think you have to be a customer of them, and get a chip and ask for the chip drop. It is a lot of chips, though. You got to be prepared for that. And I've still got a huge pile in my driveway. But let's talk about fun stuff, plant selection. Determine what your budget is. How much money do you have to play with here? There's never enough. I always want more plants. Maybe to start, select 3 to 5 species of native plants. Now make those local natives. If you live in Northern Virginia, you want that ecoregion, okay? You plant them in drifts, like Alonzo was talking about, in masses. Instead of 1 or 2 plants, plant 6 and plant them close together, and the pollinators can spot them easier. Plan for nectar flow. Alonzo mentioned this too, that you have something blooming throughout the season that will support wildlife and pollinators. Think about layers. This is the blossom layer, then the leaves and the stems, the litter layer, and the soil layer. And the more that you get coverage, although we do want some bare spots, right, for those native bees. But do you have to have it tidy? I mean, are you in a community where it would really not go over well to not have it tidy? Then look for a more designed look. You can see some designs. These guys don't always use native plants. Larry Wiener does, but Thomas Renier, Pete Ondoff can give you some ideas about how you can get a more designed, tidy look. It will be less diverse, and you'll see it'll be less attractive to wildlife, but if that's going to make a difference in your community, then you might want to consider that. Now, I opt for the messier look, and it's more diverse and probably more attractive to wildlife. And I see so much activity in my yard, even in the wintertime. So here's a shot from my front yard meadow, and you can see these are about, stick with 3 to 5, 3 to 7 species, 2 to 3 blooming at one time. These are spider warts, and which typically are a very low plant, low to the ground, couple inches off the ground, and these are reaching for the sun. They are about 5 feet tall with very long stems. So plants adjust. And bee balm, this is all bee balm here. That's a mint family and covers very well. There's some tall phlox mixed in there too. And here's the Achillea, the common yarrow, and there's some milkweed in here too. But that just gives you an idea. And actually, I'm as my plants establish and choose their own areas, I'm finding that I have more cohesiveness in my yard. Each year it's a little different. So there's some Culver's root in here, that very tall Culver's root. Up there. Then the middle layer, you got some Coreopsis. The Bachelor's Buttons is not a native, but I do sow some annuals in for extra color. And on the ground level, I have basil leaves of the yarrow, which looks fern-like, lyre leaf sage, and the fleabane actually dies back and leaves a basil leaf that covers the ground very assertively. Avoid planting these in your meadow. And there's probably a million more things that you should avoid, but these give you, these are pretty nasty to get rid of. So another plant to avoid is tropical milkweed. And I'll show you a picture of that in just a minute. It can interfere with monarch migration and reproduction. It blooms a little bit later in the season, and it confuses monarchs into thinking they need to breed when they should be migrating. It also causes a problem as our climate warms. This plant may not die back in the winter completely, and on it grows a protozoan parasite of monarch butterflies, and that can travel in the monarch, visiting the plants, and be deposited on the leaves to infect other monarchs. And this is what it looks like. The one on this one right here with the X on it is the tropical milkweed. It is a pretty plant, but I do not recommend you ever plant it. This is the native orange butterfly weed, which is gorgeous. This is the one that you should plant. So Corvosica versus tuberosa. Okay, here's another shot. I would suggest that you stick with straight species, like Alonzo said, rather than cultivars. A cultivar is just a plant variety that's been produced for certain characteristics and sometimes genetically modified. Cultivars like this one, this is the native, this is not native to Northern Virginia. Cultivar, I've heard people call it the gateway flower to get you into native plants, but I have some in my yard too, even though it's not native to Northern Virginia, it's native to the East Coast. This is a cultivar, and you see it has a fuzzy head, and what they've done is they've, at the expense of many of the flower parts, they've made the head fuzzier and more dramatic. So I had an orange version of this cultivar planted right next to my echinacea, and these were covered with insects, and nobody visited this. And this is a sterile plant most of the time too, because they don't want, it's a patented plant. So this is called Pink Double Delight, and it has the cultivar name in single quotes. So you want to avoid cultivars if you can. Excuse me. I don't know why I'm getting all these people coming in. Okay. So yeah, I have a video to share with you. This is a cultivar of Joe Pye weed. I don't know the name of this particular cultivar. These two films I'm going to show you were at my friend's house. These plants were side by side. This is the cultivar. It's a little brighter pink. Let's take a look. Okay, now I'm going to show you. Let's see. Okay. Now I'm going to go to the next one. This is the straight species of Joe Pye right next to the other one. It's quite a dramatic example. I'm going to mention Sam Droege here. If you don't follow him on Instagram, it's the USGS B Lab. I have a reference at the end. This is his 1 hour mini meadow. He put some annuals in here, and he's got perennials in here. And he says, you know, he got this in 1 hour, and he's put aggressive spreaders in. So if you don't mind the whole messy look and you want something that'll fill in, here's what will fit the bill. This is what Sam and I use in some areas where I don't ever want to mow again, and I want it to cover this one area. So fall sunflower, cop plant, Jerusalem artichoke, partridge pea, and Monarda fistulosa, bee balm, and stick with the straight species on all of these, but count the cost, because these are going to be really aggressive spreaders. But I thought that was interesting experiment that he did. So if you aren't seeing a wide variety of pollinators in your landscape, it's likely that you need to ramp up the number of plants you have to increase the diversity. Flowering plants have traits, of course, to attract specific pollinators, and not all pollinators can use the same flowers. So flowering time, density of the flowers, how many flowers there are, the height, everything influences. And again, stick with straight species. A pollinator's body size and strength and tongue length also determine. Like the long-tongued honeybee, bumblebee can get into a tube-shaped flower much easier. So another word about annuals and perennials. If annuals are desired, this is a native annual, Monarda citadora, and it's a lovely plant. And so I do try to plant that every year. But perennials provide more coverage. I sneak some zinnias into my meadow every year where there's a little space. I either plant them as seeds or start them inside. And so they are not native to Virginia, but they do provide some short-term color, and they get a lot of visitors, and they make good cut flowers. So perennials may not flower until the second year, especially if you have plugs. So let's talk about the three possibilities here. Seeds, of course, are less expensive. There's much more variety, but they're harder to get started. They need adequate moisture. You can't let them dry out. And sometimes it's hard to recognize the seedlings. Some you can direct sow. Landscape plugs, I would recommend LP50s. There's smaller ones, LP32s, but LP50s are a little bit more sturdy and forgiving. But plugs should not be allowed to dry out before you plant them or after you plant them. They're very easy to plant, though, if you're going to do a mass planting. But know that your color and the mature plants won't come that first year. All you have to do is stick your shovel in and make a little divot and plug the plug in. Now, most expensive is certainly plants, and they give you instant color and coverage. We know that native plants sleep the first year, creep the second, and leap the third year, and then you might be able to divide, give to neighbors, move to a bare spot in your yard. Here's a ridgeron, a fleabane, an aggressive spreader, but does its job well in my yard and keeps the ground covered so weeds don't come in. And it has a delightful flower that's visited by a lot. So I'm going to go through some pictures of some native plants that are meadow friendly, but I can't do that for your specific yard. So you want to go to Plant Nova Native's website to select plants based on the conditions in your yard. I'm going to just show you a smattering. You can also contact us at the extension office, and we'll help you talk through and make some decisions also. So here's some spring low growers, native bleeding heart, pussy toes, columbine, and coreopsis. We've got two kinds of violets here, and this pack or aria is a great for partial sun. And there's that beard tongue, Penstemon digitalis again. Some other partial sun early summer bloomers, the native geranium and columbine. Some of that full sun early to midsummer blooms. Here you've got the native butterfly weed, not the tropical, and Rebecca Herda and these two baptisias. Some in the summer, tall, or this one you can put on a trellis. This is the native honeysuckle. Oops, there we go. And three different liatris that are blazing stars that are native to Northern Virginia, some Heliopsis, and this is obedient plants. So you can see if you have something blooming at each season. These are some lovely fall bloomers. Got Calico Aster. Alonzo talked about how important asters are, and 2 different goldenrods here on the 2 corners. There, these 2 goldenrods. There's about 5 goldenrods that you can select, and they are magnets for good guys. Verbena hastata, and this is another Rudbeckia. In the late summer, a low ground cover that blooms. This lyre leaf sage is one of my new favorite plants. It retains those purple basil leaves all winter. Or maybe some of the carex, the sedges, they provide a good low cover that keeps the ground covered in the winter or in the summer where you have bare spots. And this Conoclonium coelestium, the blue mist flower, is a lovely flower. It's fairly aggressive though. Remember, you need the grasses. So these are the species that I would recommend you consider. Some of them grow better in shade. Some of them grow better in sun. If you go to the Manassas battlefield, you can see all of these in person if you go before they mow. So I've seeded these and I've used plugs, but they still takes a couple years to establish. I think I finally have really good growth after the 3rd year. So you got to be patient. But look at those roots that native plants and native grasses provide. That is incredible erosion control, much better than turf. Native grasses also protect those tall perennials. They keep them from flopping over. And natural meadows, again, contain a lot of grasses, and it will make your upkeep much more manageable. So here's a list of plants. You might want to take a screenshot of this, although this will be available later, recorded. But these are good for partial sun. If you have a partial sun area and you still want to have a meadow, these will make it. And for more shade, I've just started putting that Elymus virginicus in, that wild rye, beautiful. But these will all survive in the sun. And most of these are in my meadow under my black walnut too. Okay, so Alonzo talked about nativars. If you want to read more about nativars, go to Mount Cuba Center's website and read about their research. Doug Tallamy has done some research there with his students. And so a nativar is just a native plant that has some difference genetically, or some characteristic difference, like this echinacea that we talked about with the fuzzy head. So nobody likes, none of the pollinators like this. And here's the native one. So because the petals that they made to replace the other floral parts, and it limits their ability to even produce pollen, nectar, and seeds, and many are sterile. So go to Mount Cuba and take a look at their research. They've researched Baptisia, and they've set a grad student out there to count how many and the diversity of insects that visit these nativars. But again, to be very safe, I would stick with straight species, not cultivars. And remember that pollinators are not just bees, they're wasps and beetles and ants and hummingbird moths and butterflies. So just recognize the diversity that you're aiming for. Look at this. This is one of Mount Cuba's research projects, and they counted how many of each bee species were found on Coreopsis. Okay. Heather Holm is a great resource. She has generously put lists of plants for bumblebees, plants for wasps. She has a new book out on wasps. So look her up and go to this website, thepollinatorsnativeplants.com, and there are many uploads that you can take for free, and very kind of her. There's some research that's been done on monarchs, and I don't think it's definitive, but it's worth knowing about and trying maybe in your yard. The researchers planted 3 different gardens, and they mixed up milkweeds and flowering nectar sources, and grasses in different configurations. And in one configuration, the monarch eggs and the larvae were 2 to 4 times more abundant when they were evenly spaced in a 1-meter corridor around the perimeter. So these are the plants that they used, and the milkweed with the Asclepias incarnata around the edges, spaced 1 meter apart, yielded many more monarch eggs and larvae. I found that interesting. I don't think it's ultimately conclusive, but I think it's worth more study. Winter sowing is a great way to get seeds for cheap, and seeds fall to the ground. They get snowed on, they get rained on, they get trampled on, some of them get eaten, but that's the way new plants start. So winter sowing just replicates that in a more controlled fashion with recycled milk jugs. You can go to a winter sowing Facebook page. Generally, the information there is pretty good. It's a good way to get a lot of plants for a lot less money. Penn State has a paper on winter sowing. You can Google that, but it's also in my references.
Hey, Nancy, just a heads up. There's 10 minutes until the Q&A.
Oh, perfect. I think.
Yeah, you're on track.
Okay. So growing a meadow is just like any other kind of gardening. It requires maintenance, especially the first few years. And burning is a good technique, a controlled burn, but we're not allowed to do that in most of our neighborhoods. You can weed whack once annually or mow and maybe reseed some areas, but you're always scouting for woody vegetation moving in because that meadow wants to secede into a forest again. So if you want to keep out woody material, scout for those and scout for invasives while you're at it too. I've already been out looking for the garlic mustard this week. So your winter meadow, Alonzo referred to this, those seeds are filled with carbohydrates and proteins, and those stems provide habitat in the winter for beneficial insects, but it's also beautiful. This is a picture by Pete Ondoff, and I love his designs. He's not strictly native, but I think you can borrow some of his ideas to replicate with natives. So this is a plant in my yard. Oh, I'm sorry. This is a stem on the right, and that stem is filled with little baby bees. So instead of the bee house that they didn't really need, because, what were they doing long before those were sold in stores? I mean, they were in the plant stems. And so they had laid their egg in there and stuffed it full of sawdust and mud. And it thrilled me to just find that. This is a little poem at Potomac Library, if you ever get a chance to go over there. And a designer wrote this poem about flower bones. Please let us stay. We are homes and food. We are their hosts. So to mow or not to mow, leave it standing for winter, in winter for birds. There are birds all over my stems in the backyard, and leave a portion for them. And then the second and subsequent years, you probably don't want to mow the first year, but the second and subsequent years, you can mow annually if you want to. But remember, the beneficial insects use those stems until they hatch. So cease mowing, weed whacking from the end of April through late July, nesting season for bunnies and maybe some ground nesting birds. You can use hand pruners. I don't generally mow. I come in with my hand pruners, take out diseased stuff and any stems that have fallen over and need to be removed. Just to be safe for birds, delay your mowing until late September. For weeding, you're always just scouting for weeds and invasives because every place that they can, they're going to pop up. You can cut perennial weeds at the ground rather than pulling them completely out. That way you're disturbing the soil less, because the more you disturb the soil, the more weed seeds come to the surface. The first year you can consider a nurse crop. This picture here shows, I don't know if that's the oats. I put oats around some seeded areas. This is crimson clover to protect the soil in a couple bare areas until I could get native perennials in there. And again, know what your weeds are. You can always send a picture to the extension office and we can help you ID it if that would be helpful, and we give you can give you non-chemical recommendations for how best to manage it. So here's a few takeaways. The sign of a great gardener is you've got to eat in plants. You know, when I first started at Extension, clients would call us and say, something is eating my plants. What can I do to kill it? And that has changed so much, thankfully, over the years that I've been with Extension. So expect your plants to be eaten. Maybe you're thinking, I can't commit to a meadow. This is too much. Might be too much work. And even if you start, excuse me. So how about a little pollinator garden? You know, all the other great speakers that we have can talk to that. Or hell strip between the street and your sidewalk. That could become a mini meadow. You could do a hedgerow of native shrubs or a little pocket meadow. Or you could do a pollinator garden that expands a little bit every year. So Thomas Rainier is a great designer. And he says, let's think of, I'm going to paraphrase this, let's think of our lawns as not wall-to-wall carpet, but area rugs. So if there's a place where your kids like to play and they want to kick the soccer ball or play frisbee, keep that as turf, but then convert the rest of the area around it. Let's take the border and explode it out of the box, he says. And Nancy says, would you please stop trying to grow turf in wet, shady, difficult to mow spots and grow natives instead? So Master Gardeners are Audubon Home Ambassadors. You can contact us and get a free visit to your property. We're not there to judge your landscaping or talents or how many weeds you have. We all have weeds too. We're there to help you determine how to improve habitat. And if you have a certain number of species, then you can get one of these signs. That's on my yard. I want to mention our Extension Horticulture Help Desk. We answer questions about wildlife and insects and plant diseases and plant problems, just a wide variety. And so you can get a hold of us at mastergardener@pwcgov.org. And we have weekly Wednesday classes at 11 o'clock. These are the 3 that are coming up soon. You can email the Master Gardener Desk to get more information about those classes. They're all free classes. They're all on Zoom. They're 1 hour long. So I would encourage you to check it out. And here's the Plant Nova Natives website. Chesapeake Bay Native Plant Center also has some really good documents for looking at and helping you plan. These are all of our social media channels, and we put good stuff on there, all educational material, and we'd love to have you join us. We share all of our classes too. Here's the first of a resource. So the Xerxes Society, Earned Seed is a great resource. They have a lot of really great resource guides. Native Plant Seedling Identification, that's the NRCS. And the Million Pollinator Challenge, and NRCS also has a document for establishing pollinator menus, because I can't cover everything you need to know today. Sam Droege, the guy who had the 1 hour meadow, he has an Instagram account that is fantastic. You should follow him. He has fantastic bee photography. I learned so much from him. Xerxes has a meadow guidelines document, and here's Heather Holmes' plant list sites for the specialist flowers for wasps. University of Kentucky, this is the website for the milkweed planting strategies if you want to read that yourself. And here's the entrance to my meadow, and I have a 6'9" son, and he gets really irritated. He can't make it into the meadow without knocking into all the bees and plants. So anyway, I'm happy to entertain some questions now.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. I always enjoy your talks. We do have a lot of good questions. I hope I get to them all. So Daniel wants to know about watering. Can a meadow be on a slope and not have to water?
Yeah. Most native plants are pretty drought tolerant once you get them established, but those first 2 years, you do have to pay attention. And of course, it depends if you're using, plugs or seeds. The plugs and seeds need really careful monitoring until like the 3rd year. But perennials in a pot, I would say the first year and a half, even anytime the ground is not frozen, they're going to need a good soaking once a week.
Okay. And Jean asked about, can you create meadows interplanted with a few trees?
Sure. You can. That wouldn't technically be a meadow because meadows don't have woody vegetation, but that would be a lovely, lovely addition to the landscape, I think. Just natives around tree areas. Make sure that they are ones that are, can handle the shade. And if there's any chemical effects from the tree, like a black walnut, sends out chemicals that deter some plants from growing well. You just got to pick the right
plant, right place.
Right.
Okay. And Jenny has foxholes on a very steep hill. Do you have any tips for getting along with the foxes?
What about putting something like using a native grass on that hill so it kind of hid the foxholes, gave them more coverage? I had 3 groundhog holes in my front yard. I don't know. That's probably what I would do. Oops. Oh, sorry. That's probably what I would do. I mean,
Grasses.
It's joy to have foxes, though.
Mm-hmm. Rodent. Yeah, someone commented that it's rodent control.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, and Laureen is interested to hear about what you planted under the shade of a tree. I think your black walnut is what she was referring to. She says her meadow is under a large oak tree.
Okay. Those Samdrogi ones, the Heliopsis, halotenoides, cup plant did well under there. Great blue lobelia, wing stem, the bone set, all of those could handle those characters, but they're all vying for they're all fighting each other out there in the summer. One's trying to get above the other.
Someone suggested wild ginger.
Oh, in
a tree,
shady spot under an oak tree, definitely.
Good.
But that would be a low grower.
Okay. Jean is asking about starting seeds with just a thin layer of compost.
Some native seeds need to be scarified. They need to be nicked or frozen and thawed. So it depends on the seed. And some like light and some need to germinate in dark. So it would really depend on the seed. If you want to send us an email about a specific species, we can help you out.
Yeah. And Laureen tried solarizing last year, but it does not work well if you have any elevation or slope on your land. She's wondering if she did something wrong or how to fix that.
She tried what?
Solarizing.
Oh, solarizing.
On a slope, it looks like.
Yeah, because it probably didn't get hot enough.
So it's possible on a slope. It just didn't get hot enough. You think was the problem?
Oh, were the edges down? Did you water it really deep? Oops. Did you water it really deeply beforehand and make sure the sides were closed down? I don't see any reason why it wouldn't work on a slope.
Okay, that's good to know. Let's see.
Joy, if that's you, the Master Gardener intern, I would be glad to work with you.
Mm-hmm. And there were a couple questions about the weed whacking and mowing. Mm-hmm. Lorraine asked if you could explain more about weed whacking. When is this done, and how do you avoid accidentally whacking down the plants that you want there?
Yeah, I don't I don't really weed whack. You can do it once a year, you know, when it's not nesting season. But
So,
I don't do it. I go in with a hand pruner and I take a few. If I don't want bee balm to be everywhere, I'll take a few of the seed heads off and I'll leave the stems for the whole winter until spring, like late spring. And then I'll cut them down and put them in the compost.
okay. So if you mow once a year, Elizabeth is asking what month is recommended?
I would mow in the late fall, like
Late
late,
fall.
maybe late September.
Okay. And would it work to mow every other year?
Yeah, there's no reason. We have a master gardener who has like a half an acre meadow and he doesn't ever mow it. Well, no, he mows it once a year when he gets around to it.
I like that. And Susan wants to know what prevents a nurse annual plant from re-sowing and becoming an issue?
That's a really good question. The nurse plant that I used was oats. And so as soon as the hot weather comes, it just dies back. And if the seeds fall down there, it won't germinate until maybe the next winter because it's cool season. So Ernst Seed Company has some good information on that. They're the ones that taught me about that.
What seed company?
ERNST, Ernst.
Ernst. Okay. Okay, good.
Their resources on there are really good. Not that I'm promoting a business, really.
Oh, right.
They're
Yeah,
just
best
really
to do that.
educationally focused.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have 5 more minutes and a few more questions, so we're good on time. I have a sunny yard and an aggressive perennial Bermuda, maybe, grass that creeps underground and takes over everything, making the idea of creating a meadow overwhelming.
Yes.
Which meadow prep method would be most effective for killing it? Is there a good way to manage it going forward for larger yards? So he wants.
It's really tough.
Mm-hmm.
I guess if it was me, I know I have finite energy. I might pick a small area and try to clear out the Bermuda. I've done that in a couple places in my yard. You can use herbicides as a last resort, and we could certainly walk you through. But those roots of Bermuda grow so deep that herbicide application would need to be multiple times. I don't think either the solarization or the occultation would be effective enough. So what I've done is I've just mapped out a small area and I have hand tilled it and pulled out all the rhizomes that I could get out. It's so tedious. I'm sorry. I don't know the answer for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Trial and error. Okay. What was the plant you mentioned as lyre leaf?
Lyre leaf sage.
Lyre leaf sage.
Yes, Salvia lyrata. It's a great plant.
Oh, Leslie answered. Thank you, Leslie. Okay. Can a meadow and a utility easement survive being ripped up every 3 or 4 years?
No.
No.
I would avoid that area.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
You know, but they're planting meadows under a lot of the power lines, you know, to make habitat, which is a great idea.
Yeah. What do you suggest for mulch if you have to use it? Gold bean to create ground cover, so mulch no longer needed, but to start.
Yeah, I would use arborist wood chips. They're free. There's good research that says they don't take the nitrogen out of the soil.
Arborist wood chips. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey,
And
Nancy.
Yeah.
Cal Heiser got kicked off and she needs to be let back in.
I have people constantly. Okay. If I see it, I will.
yes.
I'm going to put you want me to put her phone number in the chat so you'll have it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. I'm trying to keep an eye on, people get kicked out, but I don't see anything.
No, yeah, I think she's totally off the Zoom is what it is. She needs to be
Somebody had a
allowed
question
back in.
about an Asian ladybug. I wouldn't worry about it. They're here to stay.
Okay, and Spotsylvania, they do have a Master Gardener program
Yay.
for someone. Is that, I'm sorry, I'm asking. Do
Oh,
they?
yeah, they do. Yeah.
Okay, so someone asked about that. Yep,
Uh-huh.
good, and it's free. So Asian ladybugs, leave them alone. And I think that was everything. Did I get everybody's questions?
Breakout sessions ending in 1 minute. You guys,
Yeah.
wish I could
Oh.
see you, but thank you for listening. And if you have questions, you can extension through the Master Gardener desk, mastergardener@pwcgov.org. Okay? Thanks a lot. Enjoy your day.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Enjoy.